Bonjour tout le monde, félicitations pour notre MEGAMIGS. Je suis très heureux d'être ici aujourd'hui. J'ai des nouvelles passionnantes pour vous aujourd'hui aussi. And I just want to thank everyone for the invitation today to launch our new economic research here at MEGAMIGS. And thank you for joining me today. It's a little strange, I'll be honest. I don't know how many of you are here. I can only see myself, so we'll all have to do the best we can. But the tech people here at Calico and MEGAMIGS have been fantastic, so thank you very much. As you can see on my screen, the title of our economic report this year is Canada's Video Game Industry, a National Champion Making a Global Impact. And we thought long and hard about that particular title before we released it, and we really feel that it is appropriate, especially during the last couple of very difficult years. And obviously, I would like to address the fact that it's been 2 years since I've been on the MIGS stage in person, and obviously it's been a couple of difficult years, but I am thrilled to be back, even if we are still virtual. So the title means everything, and as we go through the next 30 minutes, I'll try to keep it to 30 minutes, you will see how Canada's video game industry really is helping our economic rebound from the pandemic, as well as contributing and making a global impact around the world. A quick note on the methodology of the numbers that you're going to hear today. And credit to Nordicity Group Limited, who did the study for us again. We keep doing this in order to benchmark and make sure that as we move through the years that we are able to show, a continual progression one way or the other based on the same methodological way of doing things. I am happy though this year, and I do want to thank every company that participated in providing data for this study. This study means nothing, or it would be nothing without your input. And so I can't thank you enough. My team and I thank you for all the work that you did to help us come up with this today. And you'll see what all that work entails. But I am happy to report that almost 160 companies this year provided data, full data for our report that allowed us to produce what I would consider to be probably the most statistically accurate portrayal of the Canadian video game industry that we've ever produced. Now, again, for those of you who have no idea who's just been talking for the last minute or two, my name is Jason Hilchey, and I'm the President and CEO of the Entertainment Software Association of Canada. And who are we? Well, we are the trade association for the video game industry in this country. We represent a number of large, medium-sized international companies, as well as Canadian-owned studios from coast to coast. We have members from St. John's, Newfoundland, and I'm happy to say all the way to Victoria, British Columbia, and all points in between. A lot of members, a lot of investments in Montreal area and Quebec. Now, our purpose as an organization is to represent the industry, and I like to say that we do that on a couple of points. The first is we protect the industry, and we protect the industry from a number of different things that come up. Obviously, a lot of the issues that I have listed here, the gaming disorder, loot boxes, tax incentives, talent and immigration are all critical for the continued growth of the video game industry in Canada, but managing those in an appropriate way to make sure that the government and regulatory landscape in this country is such that it is and continues to be a quality and positive environment to make video games in Canada. And our industry association does that by leading. We also promote the industry, sort of like what we're doing here today, the report that we've released, the media associated with that, and all of the content that my team has built to put out today. So what we try to do is ensure that the industry is well represented and promoted, and the positive narrative around the impact that we make is well communicated. And so that's what we're doing today. And we do that a lot through government engagement. Now, these pictures are from February 2020. This is the last time that we were able to meet in person with the federal government at our annual parliamentary day. But it was a huge success. And I mean, in fairness, we were probably one of the last organizations, if not the last organization prior to the pandemic, who was actually able to put on a presentation. We are thankful for that. But I'm happy to say that we have excellent representation, and the industry has excellent representation at the level of the federal government with key ministers. As you can see, the former industry minister, Navdeep Bains, joined us. You can see him with Master Chief. You can see him with the stormtroopers and a lot of us from the industry. And it really is, a testament to the work that the entire industry does collaborating together, because it's not just us that does it. We couldn't do it without the members and the industry. But we have an excellent voice at the federal government level, and in collaboration with all of our partners across the country, including Le Guild in Quebec. The industry is well represented as well at the provincial level. And you can see some of the work that everybody's been doing has resulted in some incredible industry headlines over the last year or so. You can see that the industry has been characterized as one that has continued to grow and make a very positive impact during the pandemic. You're seeing a lot of headlines about growth. You're seeing a lot of headlines about video games really making an impact in people's lives as they were stuck in the house during the pandemic. And, you can see some of the other ways as well, like the partnerships that we've done with the federal government about getting vaccinated, and as well as spreading some of the news about the public health guidelines as well, really helped to elevate the positive image of the industry. So we're very happy about that. And I can say today, moving into this presentation, that the industry is well represented and the image of the industry in Canada is positive. But we don't just do that on a Canadian level. We are well connected with all of our global counterparts around the world. And as you can see, this is the last time we actually were in person in Brussels, Belgium in December of 2019. And this is a group of policy folks, industry associations, CEOs like myself and our teams, as well as members who made the trip to Brussels. And we all had a picture together. But I mean, the entire event lasted close to a week, where we coordinated on a lot of the issues that I presented here in our Canadian issues slide. A lot of our counterparts are dealing with these on a global issue as well. And we collaborate with them very, very closely. And so I just want you to know that the industry in Canada is not isolated. The issues that we deal with in Canada are not isolated. We are well coordinated with our friends around the world. In fact, I've already been hearing from some of them this morning about our launch, and getting good well wishes from them, and efforts to mimic some of the work that we've done here today. So now I'm going to get into what the survey actually put forth, and I'm going to start with a pretty big number, and that's $5.5 billion. That is the amount of money that the Canadian video game industry, and I'm talking production, so all of you who work in the studios, all of the work you do, this is not sales, this is video game development and production, and its spin-off effects on the Canadian economy generate $5.5 billion. Now, I've been in this job 9 years, and I believe when I started, we were somewhere around 2.1 million or 2.1 billion or 2.7 billion. And I've seen this go up every couple of years. We do this, almost $1 billion every 2 years. And it's staggering to think that the industry in Canada just continues to roll along, especially in the face of the last couple of years of uncertainty. But you've all done so well in producing your games from home and keeping things rolling for your studios and the projects that you're working on. So it's a big number, and it allows us, it's why I've led with it at first, because it's also the number that we'll lead with when we deal with the government. Now, we're at 937 studios across Canada. As best we can verify, it's a big jump, over the last couple of years. And I think one of the reasons is that a lot of small independent studios have formed over the last couple of years. What we're seeing is an ecosystem in Canada that is supported by a mix of both large, big publishers like the ones you all know, medium-sized companies, and then, you know, the small and micro-sized companies that are really generating this ecosystem that allows all of them to positively feed off of each other, not just in Quebec, but across the industry. And that what we're seeing is a big jump in entrepreneurial activity in the sector, which is great for innovation, great for, just like everything, getting new studios up and getting new studios into the ecosystem. So really, really pleased to see that. Now, 80% of those video game companies are located in Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia. And I'll give you a breakdown, you know, of how they're laid out. So it's pretty big between Ontario and Quebec. It's pretty much even with respect to the number of video game companies that exist, with respect to the number of companies, not necessarily even with how big they are, and obviously with employment, but the number of companies is very significant, almost pushing 300 in both of those jurisdictions. And then we've got British Columbia as well, which is, you know, just over 150 companies. And then what we're seeing is new areas like Alberta, 88 companies, 40 companies between Saskatchewan and Manitoba. And then in Atlantic Canada, almost 60 video game studios spread across those 4 provinces. So what we're seeing is, you know, obviously, as I said in my last slide, the, you know, 80% of the studios exist between Ontario, British Columbia, and Quebec. But what we're seeing is a healthy growth in the industry across the country as a whole, even though we still have those 3 concentrated sectors. But it's normal. And in the United States, you would see very similar things. You know, most of the video game activity that exists in the United States is happening in California, Texas, Washington. And so, you know, you've got those 3 big production points, but then you have video game studios across the country. And so, you know, I would say that Canada's video game industry is trending in very similar direction. Now, you can see the difference between the breakdown of those studios. You know, we have a micro, standard, and large being, you know, 100 people plus. You know, Quebec clearly leads the way on that, with British Columbia close behind. And even though Ontario has more studios, they have many fewer large studios, and they actually have more micro studios than anybody else. And so, you know, what you're seeing when you look at the difference between the, I would say, the demographic of the studio size across the country, you get a totally different picture. I mean, look at British Columbia's industry compared to Ontario's, right? I mean, heavily weighted between large and standard size companies. So standard being more than, you know, around 25 to 50 people. And, you know, Quebec has, you know, the largest number of big studios, and then a massive number of standard, and then you've got that entrepreneurial activity pushing there at the 148 level. And then you've got Ontario again, like I said, with, you know, 10 companies with 100 people or more, and the rest of it is standard, and they have more micro than the rest of the country. So it is very different. Even though the industry exists across the country, it doesn't look the same. And I always love getting this breakdown because it does give us a perspective of, you know, and when we work with the provincial associations, they always tell us, you know, I know that you're looking at things from a national perspective as ESAC, which we are, but, you know, when they work on their industry provincially, it has its own vibe and its own ecosystem, its own issues, its own opportunities that exist. And every industry is built differently. You know, British Columbia came up in the age of a low dollar, in the age of proximity to California and Washington, and, you know, is much older than the rest of the industries. And, you know, that is why it's got more larger kind of middle of the road studios with respect to size. You know, and Ontario really grew more so out of a microclimate where small studios became big. Other than a few examples, it really developed differently. And so I think that's the beauty of the industry in Canada. It just really, it may seem like on the outskirts we have 937 studios, but each and every jurisdiction within the country is so different. And then you have Alberta, which is, you know, an upstart that had some good momentum before they lost their tax incentive. they've got obviously most of the activity in Alberta, other than a few large studios, are micro activity. And so that's fantastic, because hopefully those micro studios will turn into larger studios. And that's what you need to build a competitive ecosystem. Now, another big number, 55,000 employees full-time in Canada's video game industry. Now, this is the mix of both direct and indirect, so I'll break down the difference between them. But our industry as a whole in 2021 is supporting over 55,000 full-time jobs across Canada, and that is nothing to be looked down at or sneezed at. And again, a number that we will lead with when we work with government officials subsequent to launching this report this week. It's certainly a phenomenal number for us to be able to show. And again, 32,000, just over 32,000 full-time jobs exist in the video game industry, directly employed by the video game companies that we've just been talking about across the country. The vast majority of those are permanent full-time, small amount contract, freelance, even though they could be working at a studio full-time. You may not know it, but they would be characterized as contract. And a very insignificant number of people are part-time. So it is a phenomenal story. We've grown 17% in jobs in the last 2 years, and keep in mind that we had grown over 20% in 2019, and the last 2 years have been horrific with respect to economic growth amongst most sectors. And so, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, the story that we have to put forth of the video game industry in Canada is one of resilience. It's one of pandemic resilience, one of battling the odds and using technology to advance what was already happening. Most of these 32,000 people, and we'll get to this in a subsequent slide, have been working at home for the last year and a half, right? So you've still been able to launch your products. You've still been able to do your job. I think that's a testament not only to the companies that you own and those you work for, but also the technology that we utilize in developing games in Canada, technology that we utilize to allow us to make games through distributed development models, where you don't need to be in the same room, where you don't need to be sitting across each other. I realize that it would be more ideal, but we've actually been able to not only sustain the momentum that we've had since 2019, but we've been able to add on to it. And I'm thrilled to be able to announce that today. Now, this will give you an overview of where the employment exists in Canada. Obviously, Quebec continues to lead the way with some good growth. I mean, I think that, speaking of Quebec, there are way more jobs that could be created in Quebec. And I think everybody knows that. And I think the challenge that we need to face moving forward is, and I'll get into this again in a subsequent slide, is a focus on talent production in Canada. Working with governments on all levels to introduce computer science, or at least programmatic thought courses, into the curriculum at a young age. Getting and targeting kids, both boys and girls, at a young age, to let them know that the video game industry is definitely a place where they can make a career, where they can make an impact globally. Games that they make in Canada are being sold all over the world. And, I know that the growth in Quebec could have been much more if we were able to secure the talent that we need in order to fill those jobs. And, you'll hear more from us in the coming weeks and months about Canada's role in developing technological talent and tech talent and introducing these skills into the school system. But, a lot of the growth that we could see, I believe, could actually be increased if we were able to access the talent that we need to be able to move forward. Now you'll see the breakdown of the rest of the provinces here. We're seeing good growth, very stable growth across most of the country. Alberta, obviously not seeing a massive amount of growth. And I will say that, the cancellation of their tax credit there, a year and a half ago, was not conducive to being able to move forward with an industry approach that was going to result in a lot of jobs, even though that they had excellent momentum moving forward through 2019 and then before the pandemic. But you know, we have optimistic thoughts about Alberta moving forward, but you know, obviously those government supports and targeted incentives in a global environment where we're competing against the rest of the world are fundamental for our continued growth in Canada. Now, this is a stat that's really interesting, though it is down from 2019. At 76% of full-time jobs come from large companies. I mean, this isn't a new stat for us, but it's about 8% lower, I believe, than it was in 2019. I think it was 84% of companies employed, or 84% of employees worked at large companies. But, you know, it is the way it is. We have 937 companies in Canada. Most of them are small, and most of the employment exists at those large video game companies that you know of, that, you know, have the ability and the resources to be able to, you know, hire people really quickly and, you know, create long-term opportunities. But the great thing, and I mentioned this in the discussion I just made about the ecosystem, is that as time goes on, we're seeing more and more people, and you'll see that with the drop in the percentage of the number of people who work at those large companies. You're seeing people want to do their own thing, and they want to create their own companies, and they want to see what they can do on their own. And really, it is fundamental to the ecosystem in Canada for that to happen. And I think it's a good thing. Obviously, as I mentioned, in the talent wars that we're having in Canada, because our industry is so supercharged, it is challenging for everybody. But, you know, I believe that it fosters innovation and collaboration. And, you know, who knows? A lot of those small companies that make excellent products may have the ability to, you know, get bought out by a larger company, or have their game published by a company and, you know, reach an audience all over the world. So it is an interesting statistic, but it is interesting that it has dropped a little bit. Now, you know, one thing that we always tell the government when we meet with them is how our industry is producing highly skilled, well-paying jobs. You know, and at almost $79,000 a year average salary, and I'm talking across the spectrum from junior to senior, the average salary, you know, continues to go up, and it's almost $79,000 this year. It's up by a few $1,000s from the last study, but that's on average. The important part to note is that this is about double what the average Canadian wage is. So, you know, it's a phenomenal opportunity for us to convey the impact of the industry to, you know, those of people who may look at the industry and not understand. They may say, oh, video games, but they don't see that video games are an opportunity to make a viable career. It's an opportunity to make good money. It's an opportunity to, you know, help rebuild the Canadian economy after COVID. And so, you know, this number is fundamental for us as well in being able to show that the industry is one that continues to deserve government attention or additional attention moving forward. And so it's thrilling for me to be able to say that we continue to grow in that. Now, one place where, you know, I would say I'm not super thrilled is the marginal growth of women in the industry. And, you know, some people may look and say, you know, well, why do you present this if it's bad? And we made a commitment to ourselves back in 2015 when we did this for the very first time, that we were going to continue to collect this data and present this data and be transparent about this data, because it is really, really important to the video game industry and to the ability for us to understand where we are and to move forward with, you know, an industry that is inclusive, diverse, and has the ability to attract people from every walk of life, you know, all genders, you know, backgrounds, and, you know, women are an important part of the industry. And even though they make up 23% of the industry, you know, they're spread across a number of different professions. And so what I will say is, even though they're up 3% in employment over the last 2 years, I think this chart is really interesting because it shows you, you know, the percentage of people in the industry who identify as female and are directly working on games. And so you'll see that in various parts of the country, that kind of varies. Obviously, as the company gets larger and the infrastructure within that company gets larger, a lot of women, while they are working on games, there's opportunities in other parts of the company. I think what you see in places like Atlantic and the Prairies is that you have a lot of micro companies, and it does give, the women who work in those companies have a much better opportunity to be working on games because there is no infrastructure, middle layers, there's no PR functions, there's no marketing functions, there's no administrative functions, where in other places, a lot of that 23% does get tied up in those positions. Now, I think that one of the things that we need to do, moving forward in the industry, and I go back to the skills discussion, is that we need to ensure that to get more women in the industry, we need to get more women into, the digital arts and computer science. When I speak to deans of computer science programs and they tell me that their enrollment is 15% women, it is impossible for us to exceed 15% women in tech if we aren't graduating 15% women from computer science programs. So we need to go back and address that. But I would argue that it starts even younger than that. And I don't know who's watching today, but I'd love to applaud my friend Kate Arthur at Kids Co Joignez, who we've been supporting for years and, always inspires me. And I always mention her and her vision years ago to create an organization that would act as an outside firm that would go into the school systems and teach kids coding. And it does that through, simple, innovative ways, but it does it at a stage where it reaches kids and girls at an age that is young enough for them to not feel that technology is a boys' industry. And I really feel and believe that from everyone that I've spoken to, we as a country need to do better getting this technology education into the school system at a young age before it becomes tainted or gender stereotyped. And, I really do think that if we could do that, there'd be such a bigger opportunity for us to open up employment opportunities and bring in more people. Because again, as I said, we have a lot of jobs available, and we need the best people, and we need them from all backgrounds. And so, again, you will hear more from us in the coming weeks and months about what we need to do to position Canada in a kind of post-pandemic digital skills rebuild. But I do believe, and if there are any government folks listening today, that not just if we aren't producing these talents and these skills domestically, and we're competing with the rest of the world, then we will have no hope of competing aggressively to move forward and move our economy into the next century. We need to be able to think of digital talent as a natural resource, and we need to begin producing it, and we need to begin now. And that goes the same for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, this is a new data point that we've measured this year. And, the question was about, do you have an equity, diversity, and inclusion plan across the industry? And obviously what you will see, so we've broken that down. So an EDI recruitment plan, do you have a retention plan, and do you have a training, career, and development plan? And you can see at the bottom, it's spread out across the studio sizes that I just went over: micro, standard, large. Obviously you will see the best results are in the large companies, obviously because they are likely older, they have more infrastructure, they have more policies in place, they have people in place that can manage this. And again, you see the lowest scale in the micro, who are focused on getting a company up and getting games built and out the door. And it's no surprise, but I think one of the things that, that we will measure going forward is that it's clear that, the diversity, equity, and inclusion is important for the industry. We're seeing, the beginnings of formal policies and plans being put forth, and in some cases more than just beginnings. But again, when we look at jobs, like for instance in Quebec, the number floating around is about 2,000 open jobs right now in your industry. And if we have any hope of filling those, we need to be able to open our arms as an industry to, everyone from all diverse backgrounds, and the bigger the pie, the bigger our industry is going to get. And so, as time goes on, I do really hope that we find an opportunity to embrace both opportunities to get more women in the workforce, but also more diversity in the workforce. And I truly do believe, and I know that most companies do also believe this, that by doing that, we are going to open up doors to, talent that is going to be able to power our industry going through, the next 10 to 20 years. Now, one of my final slides is a very interesting slide about work. As I said at the beginning of my presentation, a lot of you are working from home. Some of you have been going back. Some of you have been going back on a part-time basis. And you'll be able to see what the modifications companies may have for the future. And, obviously a lot of people don't know yet. That's, almost 50% of everybody don't know yet. There's a lot of no modification in size or organization, but that doesn't mean that everybody's going to come back to the office. A lot of companies are going to keep their existing office space, but doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to work the same as they did in the past. Obviously, many of you have heard the pronouncements from some companies, some in Quebec, some across Canada, some across the world about, their hybrid approaches to working that's going to come forth from the pandemic. I think it's clear that most of us have, concluded that some sort of hybrid in the office, at home work works. It's not perfect, but it works. And I think that for those that want to, there's going to be opportunity for you in that. I mean, some companies will do a hybrid. There's some that are doing work from anywhere. Some that are, I just saw, doing a hybrid and then increasing salaries because they want to be able to capture and retain the best talent. Because as we move forward, the landscape of employment and working and where you work and how you work is going to change, and it's already changed. And as you can see, as I've mentioned, with the number of job openings that exist and the growth that we're seeing in the employment landscape, 17% growth in jobs over 2 years, we're going to get squeezed. And so we need to be as flexible as possible, not only bringing in more people into the workforce than we ever have before, but also being more flexible than we have been in the past with respect to, the working environment. And I think that the data that you're seeing right now with what the plans are going forward, I think a lot of that not is going to turn into, okay, well, it's going to be hybrid. And again, that's also happening mostly with the large companies. With micro companies, it isn't as much of an issue. Some of them don't have offices. A lot of their work was being done at home before the pandemic. And so not a lot changed for them. But a lot of this is really, as you can see, happening with the standard and large sizes of companies. So that concludes my presentation. I did pretty good, kept it within about a 30-minute window. I think I just want to thank everybody. And I want to end, before I'm going to show, we're going to play a video for you that's going to kind of snap this up. A lot of the games that you've made are going to be in it, and I think you'll be really impressed with it. But I do want to end with simply just saying that thank you. The last 2 years have not been fun. They have been challenging. I'd rather be on stage in Montreal right now than in my living room with my computer to my left and my iPad in front of me. But it's just not the way that it is. And I know that the last year and a half has been easier for some and harder for some as well. And I think it's a testament to you, the developers in our industry, and those who are working directly on the games, that you've been able to continue being moved home, having your life upended and shifted, having the way you work changed, to continue to be able to produce and release the worldwide successes that we produce here in Canada and that you produce. And as someone who doesn't directly make games but spends a lot of time with my team trying to make the environment for you to make games here as best as possible, from my team and myself, I just want to thank you and say bravo. and keep up the great work. And on that note, production team, you can play the video. I just want to thank everybody for letting me be here. Thank you. Enjoy MEGS.